Hello to you, brothers and sisters from all over Africa, America, Jamaica, West Indies, and to every person who speaks and understands the English language. Once again, your brother, Zapayoro, your Francophone brother, has some information for you about what is happening behind the French barrier. The news that hit the headlines in the media in Africa recently comes from Ivory Coast, where the head of state, Mr. Alassane Dramane Ouattara, has granted amnesty to 800 people in prison or prosecuted for political reasons. The interpretation many give to this decision is that it was made in pursuit of national reconciliation after the post-electoral violence the country experienced in 2011, back in 2011, which saw the arrival in power of Ouattara, but also which caused the death of thousands of Ivorians. 3,000 according to Ouattara's government, and 16,000 according to the opposition. So among these prisoners, these 800 people concerned, there is former First Lady Mrs. Simone Gbagbo. Okay. Well, it is true, it cannot be contested that this decision, this announcement, was received with popular jubilation across the country and will certainly bring down the political and social tension for a period of time. But to avoid any hasty conclusions, I suggest we look again at two things. First, the number of prisoners and the time they spent in prison, and a couple of facts surrounding the decision to grant amnesty. First, the number of prisoners. Yes, you did hear right. 800 people, 800 Ivorians, either in prison or prosecuted for political reasons. How many were effectively behind the bars? 250. This is what Bernard Houdin reveals. Bernard Houdin is the advisor of President Gbagbo, and he was received by the French president about the issue. But it's important to remember that this number used to effectively be 800. There were 800 prisoners in 2015 in Ivory Coast. And all that time until recently, at least, Ouattara was claiming in the face of the whole international community that there was no prisoner, no political prisoner in Ivory Coast. And the son of Gbagbo, Michel Gbagbo, was arrested last year because he had contradicted Ouattara on that. Now today it's a fact. Those prisoners spent between 3 and 7 years in prison. It's the case of Mrs. Gbagbo, Simone Gbagbo. She spent 7 years in prison. And let alone the people who died either in prison or in exile, because there's over 1 million Ivorians in exile today. To mention a few, Boun Boabre, former Minister of Economy, died in these conditions. Mamadou Ben Soumaro and Goumon Diagou, they died in exile or in these conditions. So apart from those who were behind the bars, even those who were released, the 550, were still prosecuted. So this means that even though you are no longer behind the bars, you are outside, but you have that kind of Damocles sword over your head. So, well, you kind of better behave even when you're outside. So now let's talk about a few facts surrounding the decision. It's important to remember that the decision was made just a few days, 2 or 3 days after the leak of an EU report in the media. Says that no effort whatsoever was made by Ouattara's government for reconciliation. Apart from the justice of victors, the government restricts the space for public expression. That's what the report says. And the report even warns, sounds the alarms about the 2020 upcoming elections, saying that the confrontation between a power that keeps restricting the space for public expression and the rising of protests in Ivory Coast does not at all augur well for the 2020 elections. The report also denounces the intention of the government to eliminate the opposition and ensure its own systematical re-election. The report also reveals that there's a level of poverty in Ivory Coast that is really, really worrisome. They talk about 46% of the population living below the poverty line. This was in 2015. And in 2017, they talk about 47% of the population living below the poverty line in Ivory Coast. This really contrasts with the fabulous figures the Ivorian government publishes every year about an economic growth of 8 to 9% every year. One fact also to me that is related to this recent development is that President Gbagbo, who's been in jail, who's been detained for about 7 years, for more than 7 years now in ICC, is probably going to be released. That's what the media, even the French media, say. And he is going to be probably released either late this year or early next year, because after 7 years of detention, no evidence whatsoever was found against him. So if President Gbagbo is released, the next hearing is in October, then Ouattara will be isolated in his stubbornness to persecute Gbagbo, his wife, and the members of his party. So now, I think now you understand, this information should help you understand better the context in which that decision was made. So after giving you this information that might have shocked many of you, because it is really different from what you hear, what you usually hear about Ivory Coast, I suggest we reflect on a few things. The first thing is, I know that Ouattara was depicted as a democrat and a competent president, and then Gbagbo was depicted in 2011 as a dictator, although we don't really know what it means to be a dictator nowadays. I'd like you to wonder if really you had been told the truth about what was happening in Ivory Coast in 2011. Second thing, what about the promises of democracy and economic prosperity that were made for and to Ivorians and to people living in West Africa? What about those promises today? One last thing, it is really surprising, but the sudden concern of the French authorities about the situation of those 800 prisoners, because they have been detained for so many years. Why now? So these are the few things I'd like you to reflect on. And this was actually the news I wanted to share with you. So thank you for listening to me, brothers and sisters, and I'll keep you posted about Ivory Coast. Thank you very much.